Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Found in Interpretation podcast. Once again, I'm one of your co-hosts, Alain and Brian, and I'm here with Brian. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks very much. And we're also here with Judy. Judy, how are you?
Good. How are you? Good morning. Good morning.
Good
Yes.
morning. It's much earlier for you, I think, right? You're in Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm in Washington State right now. So, yep, still in
Washington
Pacific
State.
time, but
Wow.
much closer to
Yeah.
Canada.
Perfect.
All right, so don't forget, everyone, like, share, subscribe. Very important. Now, let's kick it. All right, so we're here with Judy, and Judy runs Twin Translations, a boutique translation and interpreting business with her twin sister, Dagmar. Is that right?
That's correct. You got it.
Okay, so how do I know which one I'm talking to?
Well, it says Judy on the screen, so that's an easy giveaway.
Well, oh yeah, right. You wrote it, but
But for some people, it's hard. Some people cannot tell us apart. Others know exactly who we are.
do you go into assignments and you dress the same?
You know, we share the booth quite a bit, which I love. She's obviously my favorite booth partner. We don't dress the same. Sometimes we'll wear like a similar top, or sometimes, yeah, we don't. I think after a certain age, it's cute, but not as cute as it used to be when we were like 10. You know,
Well, I guess everything is cuter when we're 10.
aren't you right about that?
Yeah. So I guess you guys don't finish each other's sentences. You finish each other's interpretation.
Actually, she is the ideal booth partner. We just have so much life experience, so much connection. And, I feel like I work really well with many of my lovely booth partners, including the one I'm working with here in Washington now. But with Daggy, I call her Daggy, it's obviously a different level. It seems sort of uncanny sometimes where we exchange terminology, we write down notes in the booth, but we don't really have to because we sort of know where we'll get stuck. It's pretty unique to have a twin.
So how did you guys start in interpretation? Did one of you discovered it and then the other one join, or were both of you interested in languages? What's the background story here?
Good question. We do have an origin story, which dates back to our childhood in Mexico City, where we grew up. And I remember we're in the school bus going back from school before a summer vacation one year. And I think it must have been middle school. And we said, when we grow up, we're going to do something with languages, and it's going to be called Jenner and Jenner Cross-Cultural Consulting. Of course, at this point, we're like 11 or 12, and we had like absolutely no idea what any of that meant. It just
It was actually quite cute.
sounded kind of cute. We're very proud of it. And
Sounds
we
very
thought, well,
professional. Yeah.
we do excel at the languages and the humanities, even though we went to a mathematical technical school. But we thought, oh, this is something we should do. And lo and behold, we did start the translation side of the business much, much earlier than the interpreting side. And my sister studied translation, I studied business, and we thought we'd need some of those skills that we can combine, and that worked super well. And at some point we thought, well, interpreting seems sort of like a magical thing that we're both interested in. So pretty much at the same time on different sides of the world, because I'm in Vegas, she's in Vienna, Austria, we decided to get some training and some credentials. And she went back and got both a master's degree and an undergrad in interpreting and translation. I also went back and got a master's degree in conference interpreting and became court certified and did a lot of exploration and a lot of discovery process on interpreting. And it seemed sort of impossible at the beginning to go from translation to adding a very different skill set. But just like my dear friend Corinne McKay, who I know has been a guest on your podcast, it's doable.
Yes.
And it was a cool journey. And now we do both.
That's awesome. And so where is your company based out of? Because you're in Vegas, she's in Austria, you said?
Exactly. She's in Vienna, Austria. So
Okay.
the company's called Twin Translations. She takes care of the European side of the business. I take care of the American side of the business. And on the back end, we had to split it just for tax purposes, right? So we technically have two different companies, two different tax bases, because many, many years ago, our accountants and CPA said, what, having two subsidiaries of the same company is going to be very difficult for tax purposes. So for accounting purposes, it's two separate companies, but the public-facing company is Twin Translations, to make sure everybody remembers the twins.
Yeah, so it's two companies, just,
Right.
of course, it's just for tax purposes,
Right.
but it would have been too complicated to have like one company and two different branches?
That's what our CPA said. This is not my area of expertise. So they said it's just much easier there's some tax treaties, of course, between Austria and the US, but they said, make it easier on yourself. It's going to save you a lot of time and headache if you split it. And we've talked about that a lot in interpreter circles, where friends and colleagues have businesses with others in different countries. And it's a lot more difficult than it seems. Transnational tax law apparently is a complicated issue. Not that I know much about it, but I think there was good advice from our CPAs back then.
And how much travel are you doing for conferences?
It depends. Sometimes I'd say more than I'd like, and sometimes not enough. It's like that always in every profession, right? You're like, I'm traveling too much. I'm not traveling enough. So right now I'm an assignment in Washington, and I'm going straight from here to another assignment in Oregon, but that's for court. So it's a mix between court and conference. And I love both. I think court is sort of the stomping grounds and the sort of bread and butter for a lot of interpreters on the West Coast and here in the US. And the conference interpreting is something I really, really enjoy, but obviously it requires a lot more preparation, and it's sort of a different ball game in terms of how the payments are structured, right? Because if you think about it, for court, oftentimes after you have a lot of experience, it requires minimal preparation. Profit margins are actually quite a bit higher. So I'm very picky with some of the conference work that I take, because I want to make sure that at the end of the day, what I'm netting and what I'm averaging is comparable to other assignments, because this certainly is more glamorous than in court, but ultimately I'm running a business and I want to make sure that I'm getting the net that I want. And you have to just divide it differently if you look at how much time you're spending on conference prep.
Well, I'm a bit surprised that if I understand you correctly, you're saying that even for court, you can go from state to state? Because I imagine court interpretation, which I don't do, I imagine it to be very local. So for instance, there's a courthouse here in Quebec City where I am. I thought I would get to, let's say if I wanted to, I could just work there rather than be sent in Montreal or other cities nearby.
Yeah, super good question, Alain. Yeah, it's here in the US, we have something that's called a federal certification for court interpreters. So every state has their own certification. And then there's something that's the highest level of court, which is federal, which currently only exists for the Spanish language, which I'm lucky enough to have. So with that certification, you are allowed to work in the federal courts, which of course operate nationwide. And the federal courts have a very big need for federally certified interpreters, of which there are relatively few of us. So we can fly around and go wherever they're calling us, from New York to Texas to Florida.
Wow, that is so cool. And when you guess that your rates are higher when you're federally certified, and the cases you work with are not like regular cases, they must be a bit more technical or something like that, or it is just about the certification?
It's just a different jurisdictional issue, right? The federal government has jurisdiction over certain cases that the state courts do not. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm just married to one, but at the federal level, you'll see more cases that have to do with trans-state issues. For example, drug smuggling, kidnapping. A lot of big drug cases can be indicted in both state and federal courts. The American legal system is complicated, but usually the feds will indict cases that they want to take to sort of a higher, bigger stage, so to say. We don't have those petty cases that you see at the state level, which is like, jaywalking and traffic tickets. Although we do have some traffic tickets inside of national parks. So the national parks belong to the federal government. So if sometimes the Germans come here in the summer to Yellowstone and they're speeding and they get a speeding ticket inside a national park, you're going to federal court. Just a friendly reminder to everybody. You don't want to mess around in the national parks.
Wow.
But yeah, mostly it's higher profile, bigger drug cases, but not always.
So we'll never see you on like Judge Judy or something like that.
No, although I like their name.
Oh, well, yes. Judge Judy and Interpreter Judy.
Combining both worlds.
There you go.
That's right.
So when you're crossing just to make sure, when you're crossing a national park in the U.S., you're in federal land.
That's right.
If I can say it that way. And if you get arrested, I mean, if you speed, you're speeding or
Even just a
something,
ticket, yeah.
then it's not a federal ticket, right? It's a state ticket, or
no, it's federal. You're gonna be seeing me in federal court. Well, not you personally, but yes.
I'll ask for a translator. I'll ask for an interpreter. Sorry. I want my interpreter.
I'll speak the best Spanish interpreter.
I wouldn't
hire her for French.
That's right. You don't want me for French. You'll be in big trouble. Yeah. So yeah, it sounds weird. A lot of people don't know that that's federal land, so it all goes directly to federal court. So, for example, if you were on Lake Mead outside of Vegas, which is all where all the water comes from, by the way, for millions and millions of people, we just rented a party boat there a couple of weeks ago. It's an incredible amount of fun. If you got caught speeding with this boat or drinking with this boat, you are going to be going to federal court.
Huh.
Because it's inside the state of Nevada, but it's in a federal area. There's federal lands called national parks and national conservation areas. That's all federal, right? But usually what we do some of these funny cases. They're called the petty calendar in federal court, and oftentimes that involves things like illegal bonfire building and yes, speeding on Lake Mead, things like that. But most of the cases are drug-related cases, immigration cases, which is a complicated issue because immigration is technically an administrative issue, but these cases go to federal court for the criminal portion because it is a criminal offense to be in this country. They say illegally, but I think undocumented is the correct term we should be using. So then there's a federal proceeding that happens mostly in border states. So there's some interesting work, also heartbreaking work. So some of the criminal work I really have to balance with civil cases and also with conference interpreting work.
So yeah, you got everything between like drug cases and like skinny dipping and Lake Mead. Like you can get anything.
I've never seen skinny dipping. I'm still waiting for that. But yes, most of it is some sort of drug-related cases, but they're not all big trials. I think if you're not a court interpreter, you oftentimes think that you do these big trials all the time. But we do a few trials a year at the federal level that I self-select into. Most of them are initial appearances, quick hearings, status checks, maybe a change of plea where people plead guilty to certain charges, and they're pretty standard. They're very predictable, right? They're technical, but they're repetitive. But most these days, it's a lot of drug cases. Yes.
At the federal level, a few months ago, I think that the Trump administration said that English is now the official language in the U.S. Has that changed anything?
Not
so
yet.
far?
Not yet. We're waiting for that to play out. I have the pleasure of volunteering my time as one of the spokespersons of the ATA.
And just for the sake of our listeners or viewers, can you explain what it is first, like for this official language?
So there was an executive order that came through that says that English is now going to be the official language of the U.S. because it turns out that the U.S. did not formerly have an actual official language designation, which was neither here or there. But the reality is that Spanish is very very widely spoken in the U.S. But as opposed to Canada, we didn't have any sort of official designation of one language or two languages, which I think would probably make more sense. But they're not asking us, so we're just waiting for this to play out. Like, what does it actually mean, right? Does this executive order have any sort of power over the judiciary? And
or is it just show?
Yeah, as a non-lawyer, I would say no, that's a different branch of government, right? But can it affect sort of things that the executive branch does, like deciding to have the website for the White House only in English as opposed to Spanish? I suppose so, right? But we are living in very difficult times here in the U.S. and language access, I suppose, will be affected one way or another. I hope not. I really don't see how the executive order can affect the judiciary. So I think the courts are safe, I would say, without having a crystal ball.
So, okay, just so I put it in order in my mind. So there's the federal government and there's the executive branch, but the judiciary is another branch. So although it's a federal court and a federal offense, it's not the executive level that can change what happens in the judiciary.
As far as I understand it, this has never really been litigated before. It hasn't really come up, but technically we're supposed to have checks and balances, right? Different branches of government mean that we have certain division that we can't all just throw it in one pot. Again, I'm no expert on all these things, and I think it's all so new to everybody, but technically the judiciary is an independent branch of government. Right, that's the whole idea that the courts are independent and are not under the executive branch. So it's a due process issue mostly, right? I mean, you do have, as a defendant, a due process right to participate in your own defense. And if you don't speak the language, that is, of course, a violation of your due process rights. There's going to be some litigation on this for sure. I haven't seen it affect any of our work yet. And I certainly hope that
if ever.
Won't. I wish I had a crystal ball, and I wish the answer to that were no. But we don't know. I live in Vegas, but I'm not a betting lady. I don't gamble. Let's just hope for the best, And I've been asked in my function as a spokesperson for the ATA, for the American Translators Association, where this is going, and I wish I had an answer. But it certainly is unprecedented to hear something like that, because whether we like it or not, the U.S. is a highly multilingual country, and there's tens of millions of people who speak a language other than English as their first language. And should those folks have access to services, to the judiciary, to government, to medical services? You know what my answer is on both a human level and an interpreter level. Absolutely, they should. They're not asking us, but we certainly are going to keep on pushing back on the organization level, ATA, NAJIT, which is the National Association of Judiciary Interpreters and Translators, and also on the personal level, right? These services are important.
Absolutely. And I'm just wondering, for the ATA, you said that you're a spokesperson, does that mean that you have to go lobby at the White House, or what does that mean?
No, it doesn't mean lobbying. We do have Dr. Bill Rivers, whom I'm sure you're familiar with, does a lot of advocacy work for ATA and for other groups. So basically, I respond to the media when I'm a group of media trained translators and interpreters at the ATA who respond to media inquiries. And oftentimes, as you know, interpreting and translation is only in the media when something really bad happens. So we also take it as sort of an educational opportunity to tell the public about interpreting, about translation. So I've done some interviews on CNN, on National Public Radio, some major newspapers. So it's fun.
Is ASL part of it or no?
ASL unfortunately is very separate from spoken languages here in the US. They have their own associations, and I don't have much contact with ASL, which is, I think, quite unfortunate, right? But they have developed a little bit differently. They're under the Americans with Disabilities Act, so ASL is something that has to be provided without any sort of question because it fall under ADA, Americans with Disabilities. But I wish we had a little bit more contact with ASL. Actually, at this conference last year when I was here, we had an ASL interpreter, and it was kind of nice to spend some time with somebody from sign languages.
Yeah, absolutely. We I think it's kind of similar in Canada too. The sign language, American Sign Language or Quebec Sign Language, it's separate from OTIAC for Quebec or ATIO for Ontario, or they have their own association as well. Now, I remember the first time I tried to hire you, I thought French was your combination.
I remember that, Brian. That was funny.
I'm like, yeah, sign me up. I'm like, okay, great, it's French. It's like, I don't speak French. I'm like,
hold on. So you wanted to hire her in the United States?
Yeah, for
and what made you think that her French actually was her first language?
It was just an assumption. I think because Corinne had introduced us, and Corinne is English French. So, so I thought you were English French as well.
How these rumors get started.
Yeah, there you go.
I would have loved to work with you with that assignment. Sounded really interesting, but my twin sister does have French in her combination, but unfortunately, that's one of the differences between the twins, and that she has French and I don't.
Was she interpreted in French too?
She does do French to German and into the other languages, not into French, but from French. So passive.
So you've got German and Spanish and English, obviously, as your language combinations?
Yeah, I do, because I have a, relatively, I don't know how unique my background is, but we were born in Austria to Austrian and Austrian-German parents. And my dad took a job in Mexico City when we were in elementary school. So we packed up and moved to Mexico City in the 80s. And, I give my mom also a lot of credit for making this happen, because I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but this is the before times, as in before the internet. And
we're the last generation to remember that.
Okay, good. Yes. So we're in the same boat here. It was quite an adventure, and I consider myself incredibly privileged to have had that opportunity to grow up in a different country and to go to a German school in Mexico, but to have this total Mexican immersion in a country that I feel very, very close to, and that magical world that I grew up in doesn't really exist anymore, and that Mexico is not a reality now, but it's still a place I go back to frequently, and I remember it with much nostalgia. It was a great way to grow up, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, my grandmother was born in Silao in Mexico, and they lived in Mexico City for many years. My mom was raised there, so
that's amazing. Good for you.
Mexico City has a close place in my heart too. So
good. It's a very special place. It's so big that you can't even process how big it is. And when I was a kid, there's of course a very small part of the city that's really your stomping grounds. It's there's so many parts of the city that you haven't even been to ever, because it's, even when I was a kid, it was in the 20 million range, and there's very little accurate data, I'm going to go out in the limb of saying, and the actual population, right? I remember I was there for the census of 1990, and I remember they're giving us information at school about how they're going to count people, and it seems a big challenge, considering that some of these outlying areas and of course more poor areas don't have addresses, and it's a challenge, right? So we know that it's one of the largest cities in the world, but I think the actual population is not exactly quite easy to nail down.
So at home, you spoke German, and outside, let's say at school, I mean, outside with little like other kids outside, you were speaking Spanish. Well, how did that work? Like,
yeah, I was actually trying to think back at how that went, and I asked my dad a little bit about it too, and my sister. And I do remember,
in preparation for the podcast.
No, just recently. I was thinking, how was it? Because I know that my friends from the German school in Mexico City, we all had these multilingual backgrounds. Some of them had one German father, a Mexican mother, or children of diplomats, or their father was working for Volkswagen. And this is back when not too many women expats really were traveling the world. So it was mostly from the father side. And we did have these funny mixtures of German and Spanish that we spoke in the German school. But at home, I do remember that my parents seemed pretty keen on keeping the German language alive. But just like all children of either immigrants or expats, we just thought that German was not very cool. That we were in Mexico and we adapted very quickly, and we just took to Mexico with a full heart. So what I remember very frequently is my mom would say something in German and would answer in Spanish.
Oh, did she accept that, or did she say?
I think she just went with it. Deutsch bitte. No, I remember she just sort of went with it, but it was good advice that they sent us to the German school, which we had no interest in going to, zero. We wanted to go to the American school, which we heard was significantly easier, and turns out that's certainly true.
The words are shorter.
Much shorter, and we heard there was more partying there too. So that's what we heard in high school. So we thought that sounds much better. But our parents said no. At some point, we will move back to Austria, which is exactly what did happen. So they said if you want to be able to have credit for all these years of schooling, you need to attend this German school. So with much reluctance, we attended the German school, and outside of school and home, our lives are really completely Spanish dominated. Really, we didn't hang out with too many German speakers at the tennis club and my circle of friends. There really wasn't anybody outside of school who spoke German. So German sort of took, I guess, second place in my life for a long time. So I wasn't as close to the German language as I was, of course, when I was a young kid.
And then you moved back to Austria, and that's where or your German got a lot better afterwards because you were using it in your daily life.
Right. I mean, it was my German was fine, but it's funny how terminology, you're just not on top of it anymore, right? When you're kind of far away from it for a long time. So yeah, we moved back, and I think it was it was junior year of high school, which isn't a good time to move. If you ever have children in your life, don't move them in
Around 15 years old?
I think it was 17 or something. So it's not a good time to move to a different continent. But I was there. I was only in Austria very briefly for about a year, because then I came to college here in the US, which is was kind of a brief transition. Then the German is a language I didn't spend as much time with as a child and as a young adult, but now as an actual older adult, I'm sort of rediscovering the pleasures of German. And actually, at this conference, I'm actually doing German, which is really nice. I'm doing English, German both.
Cool. So English is your third language, I guess. Like if you were to
in order of acquisition, yes.
Yeah.
But if I do the math, I have actually lived in the US longer than I've lived anywhere else, which is kind of a scary statistic. And also when you start adding the years, turns out the number's getting much bigger than I would expect,
I know.
So yeah,
Every year
it turns out it's a good thing, right? So yeah, I've been here since in the US since 1995. So this is my 30th year, which seems crazy.
Yeah, but your story about languages reminds me a little bit of my own in one way. My mother always spoke Spanish to me since I'm a child, because my mother's from El Salvador. And I grew up here in Quebec City, and I went to school here in Quebec, and my family on my mother's side all live in the States. And all my cousins, I've got roughly 20 cousins in the United States, all around the New York, New Jersey, Long Island area. And so when I was a kid, if I had to go to my grandmother's place, I would speak Spanish and my grandmother, with other kids in English, with my cousins sometimes in Spanish, some others in English. And then in Quebec, I would speak French. But my Spanish was sort of an everyday Spanish, and I didn't sound like I was having much of an accent or something. I was pretty fluent. But then I went to Barcelona to study conference interpretation. And because it was an exchange program with my university here in Quebec City. And when I got to Barcelona, of course it's Catalan, but I picked up the courses in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I was hearing some words for the first time that are pretty common, but since these are not words that I would use every day with my mother or other family members, I had to learn them. For instance, I still remember the first time I heard the word sequía, which is a drought. And I was like, I've never spoken with my mom about a drought, about anything, right? So it's not a word that I would use. So suddenly in the interpretation in the conference, I hear, and they were talking about a drought. And I was like, sequía, what is that? Then I just typed, and I saw it was a drought. So, okay, I do the interpretation. So I figured that since my Spanish was not I would say, an educated Spanish, it was more like a colloquial Spanish, my family members and everything. Although I may sound fluent, being educated in a language is very different than just learning it naturally. So did you have that barrier with German where you had to relearn your own language in a certain way because you were not as I would say you didn't have all the terminology that a native speaker who grew up in a country would have.
Super interesting. I love hearing about your story, Alain. That's super interesting. Yeah, I mean that we talk about that a lot, right? Like for what we call heritage speakers of a certain language, right? And how your vocabulary tends to be more limited because you just didn't have the formal education. I think it's a super interesting topic, right? It really shows you sort of the limits of the language that you speak in an everyday and how much more limited your vocabulary is if you didn't have formal education. So we moved to Mexico. It was still elementary school under the Mexican system, but I was either 9 or 10. So I did have a very, very solid base of German as a child. And of course, the German school felt very strongly about holding classes in both German and in Spanish. So there was no escaping the German there. But the interesting thing is, there are a few years early in my interpreting career where I felt that, of course, I speak it in a native language, but I felt like, should I really be going into German? And this is something that I think we don't talk about often enough in our profession, because we all sort of strive for perfection and maybe we don't want to sort of admit some of the shortcomings. But I think these are important conversations to have, right? I remember there's one event in Vegas that came up that was English into German. And is one of my, the political figures I really admire, Bill Clinton, was coming. And I thought, oh, I have the chance to interpret Bill Clinton. But I took a really hard look at myself and I thought, I don't know if I'm ready to interpret Bill Clinton into German. And I turned it down. And turns out I think it was a bad decision. I think I probably would have been ready to do Bill Clinton into German. But I think it's always good to err on the side of caution. But as I've gotten older, I've also understood that, of course, I do have that capability. Is my life more English dominated now than German dominated? Of course, but I also spend at least a couple of months and a year in Vienna. And I'm sort of rediscovering some of that higher level language, right? When you're surrounded by very educated people. And also in the booth, when I have the chance to work in Europe into German, I'm always learning from the other German interpreters. I'm like, oh, this is a nice turn of phrase. Like, I wouldn't have thought about it that way. And you're always adding to your vocabulary. So yeah, I didn't run into that issue of that I didn't have sort of the higher level German, because I did have formal education in middle school, elementary school, high school in German. Even I didn't like it. But even I had 8 years of chemistry in German, right? So I had some, which actually really helped me yesterday here at this conference where I was interpreting in a laboratory for a distillation process. And my interpreting partner was like, can you do this part because of your German chemistry background? I said, yeah, I got you.
Oh, that's pretty incredible.
That's
It's
awesome.
been fun. It's been fun.
A while back, just to change the subject a bit, I was checking out LinkedIn, and Jonathan Downey, who's been on our podcast a couple of times, he gave like some props to a bunch of people, including yourself. What was he? I mean, he only said like kudos to Judy Jenner and her research. Like, can you expand on what he was talking about?
Oh, Jonathan is such a great guy. Such a great addition to our profession. I love him. He was talking about the book that my sister and I wrote many years ago about the entrepreneurial side of translation. Back then, we focused on translation. It's called The Entrepreneurial Linguist, the business school approach to freelance translation, which in hindsight was a bit too long of a title.
Yeah, it's a
Because
mouthful.
from your German background, you like long words.
Like longer, compound long. And it was a book that came out in 2010, and we wrote it pretty early on when we thought, well, a lot of translators are incredible at the language side. They're excellent at the humanities, but I had come out of business school and I approached our translation business back then really from an entrepreneurial sort of business perspective. Like, how can we grow this? How can we make as much money as possible? Because presumably that's what we're all here for, to make a good living and not just to play with language without any sort of good living. So we wrote this book just really as a call to action for our colleagues to say, hey, look, we got to stop it with this poverty cult and stop it that, oh, I don't like to talk about money and money is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I hear you. No, but I read another book. I forget what the title was, but yeah, it gave the same example with a plumber. Like, you can be the best plumber in the world, but if you don't know anything about business, once you go and try to start your own company, you may fail and do worse than actually just doing the plumbing. And I think that's a big trap for a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, say, for example, famous chefs who try to go out on their own, and they're the best chefs in the world, but they don't know anything about business necessarily. So their business fails, their restaurant fails, they have to go back and become a chef somewhere else. Yeah, that's such an important aspect for any freelancer in any profession, I find. So I think that book does resonate to more than just our industry, but to all freelancers and anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely, because working for yourself sounds really great until you really get into the weeds and figure out that now you're responsible for everything and you need to charge accordingly. And I think we've theorized about this for 20 years because we've been speaking at conferences about entrepreneurship and about how to run your own business for many, many years, but the issues really haven't changed. We're a female-dominated industry, and without getting into too many stereotypes, it's funny, I'm talking to two males here, that is funny. But amazing interpreters, but not representative of the overall sort of a gender breakdown. So I think as women, we're just generally not as good at negotiating. We're not as good as standing up and asking for what we want. And that I think has really sort of trickled down to what I've oftentimes called the poverty cult, right? That you're like, oh, I don't want to ask for this. I don't think I'm worth it. And there are a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of insecurity, which, we all have, right? But you have to ask for what you want, and you have to run this business in a way that you can make a profit, because otherwise it's just a waste of your time, right?
Would you say that this is sort of one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs? Because, well, in my case, and it's interesting because I never thought about that point specifically. Maybe because in Canada, the market is different. We have the Official Language Act. That means that, and there's a shortage of interpreters at many levels, not all of them. And so we regularly get some work. But as a self-employed interpreter, I feel that the biggest challenge is to manage time and ambition. And what I mean by that is that managing time, you need to put some time aside to do your taxes, to do some of the paperwork, to do this and to do that. And sometimes we're like, well, I'm not making money then, so when am I going to do it? So that's one thing. And the other is the ambition part. For instance, I'm saying, okay, let's start a podcast with Brian. We got to take some time to do it. Right?
Yeah.
But we got to take the time. So I got to make sure that I'm not working on that day. I got to make sure that if it's a schedule, then I have to take a few hours to edit it. What am I going to do it? Am I going to do it in a week conference? Am I going to do it over the weekend, et cetera, et cetera? So I feel, and when you're an entrepreneur, you always have hopefully you always have many ideas, many projects and many things. And you got to learn to say no. No, in order to manage your sanity, to manage time, to manage the work-life balance and all of that.
Yeah, and I don't think you're ever going to be a business owner after this week, because I think I've been bitching to you all week long about how much admin work I've had. Alain's become my soundboard for the whole week. I'm like,
well, I get only a few emails with Brian, and I'm like, and then I don't check my inbox for like a few hours, and then my inbox is like, and I'm like, Brian? I mean, because I get CCs sometimes a lot, and sometimes because of that, some people reply, and I'm not even in the conversation, and I'm like, how can he manage so many emails? I'm like, oh my God.
Does he have a twin, maybe? Like a twin somewhere? Oh, it's a secret. No, you're absolutely right. We have limited
His name
time.
is Ryan.
Ryan and Brian. Very creative. I like that. Like Jenny and Jimmy or something. Yeah, I mean, we all have time limits. Of course, the only resource we have is time, right? And I think it took me a long time to convince my colleagues that non-billable hours are part of what you need to do as an entrepreneur. They say, I can't do marketing. I got to be interpreting. I'm like, well, but no professional person does only 100% of their job, right? No lawyer, no doctor. That's just not the way professional people live their lives, right? If you're working in a factory, then you're doing 100% billable hours, right? But there has to be a portion of the time that's going to be dedicated to client acquisition, to marketing, to recording amazing podcasts, and yes, to saying no to things, to saying, hey, there's an assignment that came up that turns out I'm not that interested in. It's not the fee schedule that I want. I'm going to say no and go do something else, whether that is working on my admin stuff or going for a walk, hitting the gym, spending some time with my husband, reading a book, whatever. I think saying no is something we're also not very good at in our profession. And then again, I think it's also sort of a female thing. You like, without generalizing too much, but I've seen that so often that people say, oh, I want better clients. I want higher paying clients, but I'm sort of stuck with this one client. They give me a lot of work. I'm like, yeah, but you're not technically stuck with them. You choose to be stuck with them. You work for yourself, right? You can say, no, thank you. I'm not going to take that assignment. Is there a risk? Of course, there's a risk. Every time you say no to perfectly good work, even if it's maybe not the fee schedule you want and you don't have work, you have to be, you have to have some risk, some ability to handle risk, right? To say, okay, if I don't fill this time, what's the worst that can happen, right? The worst that can happen is I didn't make money that day, right? And maybe I used it to do something else. But yeah, I wish I had more time, just like everybody. And I think it's important to invest also our time in what you guys are doing and helping the profession and moving it forward. I do that by volunteering my time, by having mentees, by teaching at the university, by volunteering in associations. And I think we all need more of that. So I think my contribution to this podcast has switched to a public service announcement to invite all our lovely colleagues and your guests and listeners to give something back to this profession, right? Because we all get so much from it and we need to move it forward. And your podcast is a perfect example of how we can accomplish that. But of course, it's a lot of work and I thank you for it.
But no, you're right. Like this whole entrepreneur thing, it's so important for people in every profession. Like I read an article a couple of years ago where apparently freelancers are outnumbering employees. So there's 52% of the workforce in Canada.
Wow.
And it's probably similar in the States that are freelancers as opposed to being employed by a company.
Does that include Uber Eats and Uber Drive?
I would assume so, because they're not employees, right? Like I could become an Uber driver and go pick calls on the weekend, right? Like pick people up.
You could. Yep.
Yeah.
Uber's gone to great lengths to make sure those folks are not classified as employees. Indeed. Yeah, that's a fascinating statistic. I didn't know that, but I know that obviously small businesses are the backbone of any economy, really. That they drive the economy. They're very nimble. They're adaptable. They are easy to start, right? But it's hard to do it well in the long run. You have to really value your time and not give your time away for free. And I've been telling my students this for decades. Where there's a value to your time. So if your client is like, "Hey, can you help me walk me through remote simultaneous interpreting on Zoom?" Yeah, I can help you, but there's a cost associated with it. Here's my fee schedule. It's not free. Why should it be free? You can't go to your lawyer and say, "I want a free contract." But I think we tend to be so giving with our time to clients, but we have to start billing for these things.
Yeah, well, you just mentioned something that I heard early in my career from someone here, an owner of an agency here in Quebec City, and she told me that, oh yeah, I've explained to the client that they should see us as lawyers,
Love that.
and that's how we should bill it. And I was like, oh, okay. And since I heard that very early in my career, then it kind of changed the way I thought about it, and it basically shaped the rest. Even today's behavior and how I see myself and how we should see ourselves in our profession.
I love that. I think we need to demand that. And lawyers are good at many, many things, and billing for their time is one of them. And I think as a profession of interpreting, and even on the conference interpreting level, we haven't really done a very good job. I heard recently from a colleague, he said, "Oh, this client's asking me to fly to a different city, and I got a friend in that different city, so I'll just stay at her house." I said, "Why would you stay at her house? The client should pay for you to stay at the
In a
hotel."
hotel.
She's like, "No, but I'm trying to save the money." I'm like, "You shouldn't try to save the money because this is a bad precedent for the rest of the profession, right?
Yeah.
Take the hotel room, and then if you want to stay at your friend's house, you don't want to actually be in that room, go to your friend's house, but keep the
But
client honest. This is an expense they need to cover."
one more thing about that. It's to me, it's even worse than that, because it devalue it, you think you're helping the client, but it's bad for your own reputation. Because if I have anyone in any profession who's really right up there at the very top, they're not going to do it for cheap. They're going to ask me for this, and that, and have a long list of demands in order to accommodate them. And if I have someone who says, yeah, I'll just hitchhike to, I don't know, to come to your podcast, let's say, although we don't bring anyone anywhere, then I will think, oh, this is a hitchhiker? Yeah, maybe that person is not as worth as that person claims to be. There's also the reputational side of it. And when you're a professional, you should really act like it. You should dress like it. You should talk like one.
Mhm.
And I think that then higher clients and better paying clients will basically hire you because they'll want the best.
Well, there's a
So,
reason why people, like, when people have conferences, that they book the hotel. Like, you're going to a different city. You don't know, like, the public transportation there. You don't know, like, if you're going to get there on time, if you're somewhere else. Like, the whole goal is that everyone's in one place so that the conference goes well. So, like, as soon as you start saying, "Oh yeah, no, I'm going to go find my own accommodations," then that opens the door to maybe, like, is the subway running that day, or is there Uber in this little town, like that kind of thing, right? So
Absolutely. That you bring up another great point about that, Brian. Yeah, here in this very fancy hotel, I just take the elevator downstairs, and then my booth is waiting for me right there. And I think those standards are important, right? As interpreting is changing, like all professions. I don't know if the glory days of us traveling around the world to cool conferences are over. I don't know. I just recently interpreted in Sri Lanka, which is really cool. Is that going to happen again in a few years? I don't know. I'm going to enjoy it while it's happening, but I think it's really important that we keep on fighting for those standards, and of course providing the flip side of the coin, which is the professionalism, the level of preparedness, the being on time, which is my absolute pet peeve number one. A person born in a German speaking country, you can imagine that for me punctuality is a big sticking point. And I notice when people, even for different booths, like at this event, for example, we've got 8 booths, 8 languages. I notice who's there early, because I think that's something that some interpreters forget, right? That many of us hire each other for other events. And of course, I have events too that I would need different languages, and people are paying attention, right? Who are the folks who are there on time? Who are the folks who are there early? And actually, I want to tell you a funny story about this travel thing that you may enjoy. I recently had a client who had a conference in Vegas, and of course, I'm in Vegas and I happen to be in town. And they said, "We want to pay you less than your fee schedule, but we'll put you up at a nice hotel room in Vegas." To which I said it nicer than this, but I said, "I've got a perfectly beautiful house in Vegas with a pool. You're welcome anytime, gentlemen, by the way. It's a great party house." I said, I don't need a hotel room in Vegas.
I was
You
in
want-
Vegas in February, so I should. Next
kn-
time I go to
you-
Vegas, I'll drop
you are
by.
not you're not allowed to come to Vegas without checking in with me. That's an interpreter rule.
All right.
Private interpreters must check in with me, and I'll need to take them out for a drink. Anyway, so I said, no, I don't need. If you want to put me up in this hotel room, fine. If you want me to stay here, absolutely. But no, this is my fee schedule, and this is what it costs. And then they said, well, but it's a $600 hotel room at Fontainebleau. And I said, look, you're talking to a Vegas girl. This room is not $600. It's $350, and it's a nice room, but they're over decorated. They put too much furniture in there. It's really not that great of a room, but they have a nice gym. So if you want me to stay there, I'm happy to stay there. If it makes your conference easier, I'm not lowering my fee schedule. This is the fee schedule. And they said, okay, I guess we're just wondering.
We're just wondering.
Like, yeah, it worked out well.
That's good.
One time, just to finish this on the same thought. One time, many years ago, when one of my very first assignments, the owner of an agency calls me and says, "Oh, can you lower your fee a little? But there's going to be great chicken at the buffet."
And there's a glass of water for you too.
Very well.
That's great chicken.
Brian knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. But I think just to reassure you, Judy, I think that I don't think we're going to be unable to travel in the future. I think you keep enjoying it, because I have had colleagues like 20 years ago who had been in the profession for 30 years, and they went on cruise ships doing interpretation and whatnot. Like, oh yeah, those glory days are gone. But then 20 years later, you're going to Sri Lanka, Alain and I are traveling. So you know what? In 20 years, we'll be fine.
I absolutely hope you're right, because I'm loving this too much for it to change, right? But I'm always prepared mentally for things to change, right? Which I think is a healthy attitude, right? Instead of just hoping and clinging on to the hope that everything will continue to be the same, I'm open to the possibility of change. But I would, of course, love to continue this, because while it's a lot of work, it's also a lot of fun. And as you know, some assignments are more fun than others. Some are more meaningful than others, and some are really something that fills you. It just fills your heart with happiness that you're able to make this interpreting happen. And others is very corporate and very far away from the language. I did some of these big events in Vegas for Amazon Web Services and for Microsoft, and it's meaningful work, but you're not close enough to the people to really sort of feel the effect, right? So nobody's coming up to you and saying, "Hey, thank you for your great work," because there are 10,000 people in this ballroom and the booths are backstage, and it doesn't feel as direct, right? But here at smaller conferences, there are only 200-300 people here. Folks will come up to us and say, "Hey, thank you. I didn't even know we'd have interpreting services, and I was afraid that I wouldn't understand what anybody was saying, and now we do, and that's meaningful." Some of those things are incredibly meaningful, and when that happens, when those magical moments happen in the booth or liaison interpreting, it reminds you of how special this profession is.
Absolutely. Speaking of Vegas, I when I sent Alain to Las Vegas, I think you're right. It was in February-ish.
Yeah, I think it was in February.
I worked with an AV company in Vegas that supplied the interpretation equipment. They were awesome. They're awesome to deal with.
Yeah, they were.
I think it's probably the same one that I'm working with right now. Is it Global Interpretation? They're amazing.
Yeah. Is it Chris?
It's great. I'm here with
Okay.
him right now. Oh my
Awesome.
God.
Say hello to Chris for us.
I will.
Yeah, tell him the French Canadian guy from Quebec City, and he'll know.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I just saw him at breakfast. I said, "Hey, I got to run. I have to go upstairs and do this podcast." And this is what I love about interpreting. Well, one of many
Small
things,
world,
these connections, right? How small it is. I will go look for him, tell him that you two say hi. It's so cool.
This was free advertising for him. So there you go.
Yeah, I was like, should I mention his name? But yes, he's great. So he deserves
And
free
Well
advertising.
deserved. Yeah, well deserved kudos.
All right, so Judy, thank you so much for joining us into the podcast. It was amazing. Wow, we're almost at 1 hour, which is actually longer, but we had some great stories.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so happy. It's such a pleasure and an honor that you invited me. And I know how much work this is just in scheduling. And I'm sorry, my schedule has been so tough. And thank you for keeping at it and finding a slot that worked for all of us. And I'm very grateful. I love the work you do. I love the stories and I love your style. So I'll keep on sharing and subscribing, of course, and telling other people about it.
Then I will not repeat everyone. I will not repeat to everyone to like, share, subscribe. I will not do that. So
Okay.
I've already said it, but it doesn't hurt to say it again.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Judy. That was amazing to have you and to finally get to talk to you for like an extended period of time, not just over the phone. And I think we may have all have something in common. Did we all do the Glendon, the Masters?
Yes,
program?
I was going to bring that up. I'm so glad you brought it up.
I
Glendon
wanted to
nights.
ask you about the Masters. Right. Glendon as well?
Yeah.
Yes,
What year?
Glendon. I graduated in 2022.
Yeah, more recently than us.
I got to check. When did I graduate? My diploma's right
Actually,
there.
I'm beginning to doubt too. Was it 23 or 22? I did it later in my career. I think it was 22. Yes, 22.
Anyways, yeah, something else we have in common, but maybe
I love it.
we'll have to bring you back, and then we'll talk about all the other things we have in common as well.
Oh, I'd love it. I think that there's a lot to talk about. I'm
Absolutely.
happy to come back anytime.
We'll do a podcast from the pool in Vegas.
There you go.
I love that. I have 2 barking dogs. I'm not sure how well that will work, but they're cute.
Yep, they're invited.
Perfect. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
everyone. All right. See you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.